Giratina V-STAR is by far the best free deck given away to all Pokemon TCG Live players in 2023, and as luck would have it, by making just a few key additions for a small amount of credits, it becomes a Tier 1 deck. For starters, this is everything you get in the free Giratina V-STAR deck. So many cards you need to build Lost Zone Giratina are present here. 4 Comfey and 4 Colress's Experiment get your cards into the Lost Zone, which allow your Cramorant to attack early, your Mirage Gate to then accelerate 2 energy into play once there's 7 cards in the Lost Zone, and then your Sableye can spread 12 damage counters, and your Giratina V-STAR can one-shot any Pokemon with its V-STAR power once you have 10 cards in the Lost Zone. However, there are some unnecessary inclusions, including Gardenia, Thornton, and Cross Switcher, so they can be removed. Also, even though they're good cards, you don't need the Snorlax or Lumineon V. So once we make all the changes to improve it for the Paldea Evolved meta beginning on June 8th, this is what you'll want Giratina V-STAR to look like. I'll begin with the Giratina. The free version of the deck only includes a 2-2 line, so you'll need to craft one more Giratina V for 750 credits and one more V-STAR for 1025 credits. If you have enough credits though, I highly recommend getting a second Giratina V to bring the total to 4. If not, you can get by with a 3-3. Giratina V-STAR is your big attacker, dealing 280 damage at the cost of putting 2 energy into the Lost Zone. Knowing when to use Lost Impact and when to use Star Requiem could be the difference between winning and losing. And don't overlook Giratina V. The new Mimikyu is immune to damage from Pokemon V and EX, but Giratina V's Shred Attack goes through Mimikyu's ability, meaning evolving into the V-STAR right away isn't always the smartest thing. Because this is a Lost Zone deck, you'll have to make some tough decisions along the way. Comfey allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one into your hand and the other into the Lost Zone. Colress's Experiment, meanwhile, lets you see the top 5 cards of your deck, then put 3 into your hand and the other 2 into the Lost Zone. So a decision you make on turn 1 could cost you the game on turn 5, so keeping track of your prizes and how many copies of each card are in the Lost Zone and the discard pile is key here. The rest of the Pokemon are super straightforward and don't actually feature anybody from the Scarlet and Violet era. Cramorant can do 110 damage for free once you have 4 cards in the Lost Zone. Sableye can spread 12 damage counters once you have 10 cards in the Lost Zone. And you can punish your opponent with Radiant Greninja's attack if they aren't playing Manaphy. Just keep in mind that you'll have to use Mirage Gate to power up the Greninja. With the new addition of Jet Energy, the deck looks a little bit different than it did during the Scarlet and Violet base set meta. By attaching Jet Energy to a bench Pokemon, namely Comfey, you immediately switch it with your active. The deck plays 3 copies, which cost 100 credits each, and it replaces your need for Beach Court and heavier counts of Switch. Looking at the basic energy, you play Grass Energy and Psychic Energy to power up Giratina, as well as Water Energy for Radiant Greninja. In order to get that energy into play, you'll have to rely on Mirage Gate, which doesn't activate until you have 7 cards in the Lost Zone. Then you can search your deck for 2 basic energy of different types and attach them to your Pokemon however you want. As for the stadiums, because of Jet Energy, the deck can now play Path to the Peak, which shuts off the abilities of every Rulebox Pokemon. This makes life so much more difficult for Lugia V-STAR, Mew VMAX, Miraidon EX, and it shuts off the new Squawkabilly EX, assuming you go first and get Path into play. While Path does shut off your own Radiant Greninja, you can always bump it with Lost Vacuum, activate Greninja's ability, then slap your second Path down onto the field if you're so lucky to have it. I personally have been waiting months for Super Rod. Instead of having to play cards like Energy Recycler and Clara and Miriam, now you can just run Super Rod. The deck does only have 2 copies though, and it's your only means of putting energy back into your deck from the discard, so you probably don't want to send both to the Lost Zone. Then we have Battle VIP Pass and Nest Ball to get our basics into play, Switch Cart and Escape Rope to use as many Comfey as possible as early as possible, and the aforementioned Lost Vacuum to bump a Stadium or a Tool card. Do note that the deck doesn't play a single copy of Ultra Ball, meaning you have no way to manually search the deck for Giratina V-STAR. While you will churn through your deck like crazy, there's always a chance your Giratina V-STAR are on the bottom of your deck, unable to be drawn. If that happens, try experimenting with Ultra Ball or maybe even Mesagoza if you want to increase your consistency. The only tool you play here is 1 copy of Choice Belt. That's because Giratina V-STAR does 280 damage with Lost Impact. It's a great number, but it leaves you 30 damage short of a Mew VMAX KO. By attaching Choice Belt, now you're fixing the math. Otherwise, you're left with the job of cleaning up a Mew VMAX with Sableye, and hoping they don't shuffle it back into their deck with Psychic Leap. Now let's look at the supporters. Almost every deck is going to play Iono come June 8th, and Giratina VSTAR is no exception. Iono is amazing late in the game to disrupt your opponent by giving them a low hand size, and don't forget that you can use Iono to potentially put energy from your hand back into your deck, thus powering up Mirage Gate. Similarly, there is one copy of Roxanne. While Iono sees players drawing cards based on their remaining prizes and can be used at any point, Roxanne only activates when your opponent has 3 or fewer prizes remaining. Then they shuffle draw 2 while you shuffle draw 6. Essentially, Roxanne is a dead card until your opponent takes 3 prize cards, but when it finally activates, it's great. Of course, 4 Colress are here, and finally we have 2 copies of Boss's Orders. Choosing who you knock out with Giratina is extremely important. You don't want to have to use Lost Impact against a meaningless Pokemon. You want to be taking big KOs with Giratina as often as possible, and Bosses allows you to do that. When all said and done, you only need to spend 3,825 credits on these cards to make Giratina VSTAR a Tier 1 deck. The Giratina are the most expensive, requiring a total of 2,500 credits for 2 V and 1 VSTAR. All the trainers you need cost a total of 1,000 credits, and since they're all staples, they can be used to make other decks you want to build. And finally, 3 copies of Jet Energy will run you 300 credits. There is a chance we get Jet Energy or some of the new trainers in the Paldea Evolved Battle Pass free decks, which will be available from June 8th until August 9th. So make sure to claim those free decks before crafting any cards from the new set. And remember, to craft cards you don't own in TCG Live, you have to go to Filters and select Show All. Search for the card you want, click on it, select the art you want, then click Exchange, then confirm exchange. In terms of other options, it's simple. You play a traditional Lost Box deck rather than a Giratina Lost Zone deck. Since you already own so many of the necessary pieces, the shift isn't going to cost you very much. In fact, it's actually cheaper than the Giratina version. You already have a free copy of Raikou V from the Regieleki VMAX deck, which means you only need to craft 4 expensive cards. Those are Dragonite V at 750 credits, as well as 3 Holo Rares at 425 credits each. The new Luxray from Paldea Evolved, Forest Sealstone, and Sky Sealstone. You'll also need to craft a few uncommon trainers at 100 credits each, but if you want to play a different version of a Lost Zone deck, this one will only cost you around 2,100 credits. I'll include lists for both of these Lost Zone decks in the description, and if there's any other changes you'd make to these decks, let everyone know in the comments.